Well, good afternoon. I'm Leon Davis. It is 2 o'clock, and this is Altitude Adjustment. This week, there were three news stories that I thought were. Um, so, last week, I talked about having a national discussion about where we are in society, what we expect, how we want our society to develop. And there were three news stories that I thought were separate and distinct and brought up particular issues that we might need to cover. The first was the Roseanne story, where she tweeted and her show was canceled because of that. Then there was the um, um, her name was right on the tip of my tongue, Samantha Bee. So Samantha Bee then made her statements about the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, and those I thought were two totally separate stories that had uh, different issues that needed to be addressed, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the third story was a story out of New York about this Jewish gentleman and this black lady had a heated discussion on a bus, which I thought also brought up a completely different issue that we probably need to be discussing. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the next coming 29 minutes. Welcome to Altitude Adjustment. So I want to thank you again for joining me this afternoon. And I'll start with the first story. The first story being, okay, well, let me go back a little bit. I'll take that back. So let me go back a little bit. So last week I mentioned that I thought we should have a national discussion. And in my mind, I thought of a national, how would we have a national discussion? You know, how would that look? What would it look like? And I was thinking because politicians have to represent their constituents that they would be a part of the discussion. And then I thought about it. Politicians and the way we run elections and the way we campaign and how we function, politicians tend to be more about getting reelected, and they at this point they only tend to represent, rather than their whole district, they just represent a portion or the portion that got them elected. And I think that's sad because they are there to represent the whole district, and they have the opportunity because they can be they are contacted by different ideas and ideologies within their constituency. So they have a lot of information, or should have a lot of information, that allows them to help try to represent different voices from the communities that they serve. And that does not seem to work well. It doesn't seem to be what's going on and what's happening. It seems to be that they're fighting for their political lives, and they say they're supporting their constituents, and then half or a large part of their constituency, or a small part, is fighting just to get their attention. So politicians, though I thought that they would be a great place for the whole discussion to start, seem to have eliminated themselves out of being the voice of moderation and helping to facilitate the conversation on a national level. And so how do we have a national conversation, or do we have a national? Is it possible to have a national conversation? Now, I'm one of those people who believes in addressing a problem head on. You identify the problem, and if it's something that requires conversation and that requires a dialogue, then you get the people in the room who you need to have the dialogue with, and then you have the dialogue with, hopefully getting some action items that come out of it, what you're going to accomplish, how you're going to solve it, what is it that you're trying to solve, identifying exactly what it is you're trying to solve, but you address it head on. And that's, to me, how you problem solve. And so that was how I was seeing a a national dialogue to happen is that we start to identify some issues. We find, as I mentioned, that politicians will be a part of it, but that we then have a national discussion, try to come to some levels of conclusions, some positive steps forward, and what we're trying to accomplish. And what I noticed this past week with the 3 stories that I mentioned to you is that we're actually having a national dialogue. Now, in the past, shows like Roseanne and Blackish have brought up particular issues that we as a society may want to or need to address. And sometimes there's action that comes from that. There's a movement that starts, and we try to get things done that way. But usually those are few and far between. They are, an issue will come up, it'll be brought up on a program, and then it fades into the background, and sometimes little or nothing is done about it. So the problem persists, which is where we are with quite a few things. The problem has persisted. The can was kicked down the road because as a society, we did not address it. We did not resolve it. We did not come to a conclusion that was agreeable for the majority of society. And so I was hoping, I'm saying that we really need to have, or it would be a good thing to have, that national discussion identifying things that we want to be in our society, how they look in our society, how they play out. And the question then becomes, well, how do we have that? How do we have that discussion? And as I mentioned, we can't get all 300 million people in a room to have that discussion. We can't get everyone's view, although because of the internet, because of the change in technology, we have a greater opportunity for more people to participate in the discussion. And we do have a lot of smaller discussions. So my question is with all of those smaller discussions, with my doing a podcast and everyone doing a podcast, or more people doing a podcast, I don't want to say everyone, more people doing a podcast, or more people having access to a communication tool to have their voice heard, how do we turn that into national action? Again, it's great when we have a movement that starts, that we get something done, but on the overall, there are a lot of issues that just don't get addressed, or don't get addressed well enough, or it is assumed that people are good people, or that we see good the same way. How do we identify so that everyone sees, or that majority of people sees good in the same way? So a particular issue, I download quite a bit of software because I was in technology for quite a while. And one of the things about software that changed over the years was the term free. Free to me always meant you didn't pay for it. It was free. Now, free means a number of things. It means shareware. It means trialware. It means a trial. So you can download it free, but it's not free. So they use the word free to get you to download the software where you otherwise would not have downloaded the software. And so they've ostensibly changed what free means. And so my thought is that we should have a standard definition of free that just because of it being communicated well, it allows people to understand what to expect. It sets expectations and it eliminates frustrations and anger and people feeling like they've been duped or cheated or in some way put upon. So that was why I'm saying that we should have a national discussion so that we can try to identify ways that we want to communicate with each other, ideas that we think are that should be communicated or should be explored, so that we have a better understanding of each other and how to communicate with each other. And as I mentioned, there were the 3 news stories, and each one I thought had a particular issue that would be great if we addressed it on a national level. And the first being the Roseanne Barr story. So there was her tweets that many consider, and I have to say many, because there are people who do not consider her tweets racist. So how do we get on the same page if the terminology means something different? If free doesn't mean free, if free can be co-opted to mean just download it and I continue to send you advertisements and try to get you to buy the software, and that I cripple the software so that you only get to use part of it, so that I can try to force you into buying the software when I've told you or I've advertised to you that the software is free. So if we're not using the same terminology, if we're not using the same language to describe something, then is there a way for us to come to some type of an agreement? Is there some way for us to move forward? Because we're not using the same facts. We're not using the same ideas. We're not using the same terminology in the conversation. So regardless of what I say, if you have a different idea than what I mean, then how do we come to an agreement? How do we move forward? So that was one of the reasons I'm pushing, or I won't say pushing, I'm exploring the idea that we need a national conversation, or we need some way that we address that issue, so that we are talking the same language, talking about the same thing, and working towards a common goal, or at least identifying what is a common goal, and should that be something that we're working towards. So there was the blow up over Roseanne, and then that got crossed over into the comment by Samantha Bee. Now, the reason I see the Samantha Bee instance different than the Roseanne tweet was that Samantha Bee's issue or news story is more about common decency and how we talk to each other than it is about racism. So a white woman calling another white woman a cunt has absolutely nothing to do with racism. And yet those two instances were conflated. If Roseanne was pushed from her show because of her tweet, why isn't Samantha Bee pushed from her show because of her tweet or her instance? So there was two different topics, and both need to be addressed as they are at the core of the topic and not pushed into a general discussion, because there is specific information that needs to be addressed in each one of those situations that does not pertain to the other situation. Now, there is some crossover. Sure, there was something that in both situations, there was something that someone objected to, and these were both celebrities. They were both in the public eye. They both have a public microphone, and there was something considered wrong with both of those situations. And but there were two distinct, in my mind, two distinct situations that required distinctively different discussions. And so I think that's important to identify. And so I mentioned earlier that I thought we are having that discussion because there was clearly an attempt in some of the panel discussions that I saw to define those situations differently. Now, it did not rise to the level that I thought was going to be completely helpful, because there is the issue of time. So each segment is given so much time that they're allowed to cover a particular topic, and then if you have more than 4 or 5 people sitting at the panel, then everyone gets 1 or 2 moments, not even 4 minutes maybe, but they only get short time in order to make their case. And in a discussion, when you're trying to make your point, there's a back and forth that is important, because I make a statement, you process that statement, and then you give me a rebuttal. And I look at your rebuttal and determine whether you fully understood the idea that I put across to you. If not, then in my rebuttal to your rebuttal, or in my comments back to you, are there to try to help better define for you what it is that I'm trying to talk about, so that we're both walking down the same path, that we're both at least talking about the same issue and working towards a resolution on the same issue. The problem with a lot of these panels is they previously, a lot of, I said just previously, but many times there's the just make my point. I'm angry, I'm frustrated. Many times, especially under this current administration, presidential administration, many times there's a lot of anger and emotion or frustration or just plain emotion that's being expressed in ideas, rather than trying to define or find a better way to communicate with each other. I do believe that some of that is necessary, and some of it is helpful, but I also believe that some of it is unhelpful and it's unhealthy, because it leads to greater frustration and greater angst. Not that frustration does not have its place. Frustration is just something that may push someone to work harder at trying to make their point or trying to understand the other person. And those things are, I think, really important that we need to do with and for each other. So the Samantha Bee situation being it's how we talk to each other. Many people still have to be helped with understanding comedy and comedy's place in our dialogue, which is interesting. um, so many times in recently that comedy has been the tool by which we've been able to better understand situations. So we know that it can be extremely helpful. Um, but in this particular instance, it did not come across as, I think, helpful, that it did not help bridge anything, but it helped further create more division because it allowed people who wanted to be angry a platform to, or an issue to be angry about. And I have a belief that when we're angry, we're not attempting necessarily to resolve anything or move forward with something or to improve anything, but anger has a tendency, when we're angry, to look to salve our anger, to somehow bring back an equilibrium, so we're no longer angry, but that may only create more anger. So if I'm angry and I retaliate against someone, they may want to retaliate because now I've created anger and frustration in them. And so at some point, we have to stop being angry at each other and stop, I don't know, badgering or beating or attacking one another, so that we can get to a point where we're interested in resolving issues. Now, the last story was a little interesting for me. This was the woman on the bus in New York. She got into an argument with a Jewish man, and he started, or I can say he started. So she made a comment about that people on the bus did not get up and offer their seat to this woman with her children, where they would have done it if the person was Jewish. And the Jewish man said that he felt that she was attacking Jews. And so he responded that he was not going to let that go unchallenged. And so this escalated. So now we have this situation where she was either misunderstood accidentally, misunderstood intentionally, but either way, she was misunderstood. And rather than a calm discussion proceeding from that so that it could be quickly resolved and the point that she was trying to make be understood so that we can move forward and hopefully a better outcome would come, it just continued to escalate. That situation, I think, displays how we. So one of the things that came out of that situation that surprised me, I hadn't really thought about it, but that Judaism is a religion. It is not a class of. It is not a race of people. But in our society, that's kind of tend to how it's portrayed or how it's looked at, and so I thought that was interesting. And with that, there are a lot of things that go on in our society that we're all misunderstood, that we all have misconceptions about. And how do we? Does it have to come from anger? Does information, or that how we have this conversation, does it have to start with anger? Does it have to start with yelling at each other, or in some way with outrage? How do we have that national discussion? How does it get implemented? Does it get implemented? Is it possible? And I don't know where to go with that. You know, that's one of the things I'd like to ask people input on is, do we need a national discussion? Do we, or is that just how society operates? That's just how large. Um, I believe that a discussion starts where we identify problems, talk about it, and then try to work towards a resolution. Does that scale up? Now, on a one-to-one level, that works. Does that scale up on a national level? Is that doable for a country to look at the problems that it has, try to identify a solution, and work towards a common goal? I thought politics was that vehicle. It has not turned out to be that way. It is not that it is not possible. It is that it has not occurred. At one time, I thought it appeared to be that way. But now it is more important to get reelected. It is more important to say things that enough voters will vote for me so that I can get into office and then implement that. But if you're not implementing a solution that everyone can at least agree with, what is happening? Now, 300 million, getting 300 million people to agree on one topic. I have absolutely no illusion that that's going to happen. But getting people to at least be able to compromise and say, I may not get 100% of what I want on this particular issue, but maybe I can get 100% of what I want on another issue and get an acceptable amount on this particular issue. And we don't even have that discussion. We actually have people who say compromise is bad. If there is no compromise, if there is no sharing of the good and the bad, there is no sharing of successes and failures, we will never be able to agree. There's just too many viewpoints out there. There's too many requirements to achieve certain goals, and too many ideas of what success is. That, do we even know what success is? Have we identified what is success? Because it appears to me right now what we're doing is we'll get a certain people of this ideology into place, and they'll put in what they like or what works for them. And then over a period of time, a different ideology moves into place, and then we go back to where we were before. Then the pendulum swings the other way. And when the pendulum swings the other way, of course, somebody feels slighted, or they feel cheated, or they feel that they haven't gotten what they wanted. They were happy with the way things were, regardless of who else was feeling pain because of it. And so we don't work towards finding a solution for everyone. It appears we work to find a solution for ourselves, and it's every man for themselves. And I think that's difficult for a society to function that way. And maybe some people feel that that's success. Some people work best in confusion. They work best in chaos. And whatever rises to the top then becomes acceptable. And other people don't. So I would like to know what you think is a way to address that issue. Is it fine the way it is? Do we make strides to change that? And how do we change that? I'm going to wrap up the show today. I want to say thank you very much for taking this opportunity to hang out with me. Alrighty. Just when you think you got it. Alrighty. The video podcast is available on YouTube. All you have to do is search for Lions Den STL. Now, the audio podcast is available on Stitcher.com, Podcast.com, the iTunes Store, and the Google Music Play Store. Of course, the internet is powered by your likes, shares, and comments. So please, like, share, and comment on this episode where you find it, because it matters. Remember, be cool, be calm, and above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because they may not be looking out for you.